All right. Well, it sounds like something out of a horror movie, the storm that swept America. But it's real, a deadly winter storm that started in California, and now it's heading across the country all the way to the East Coast.
That storm is expected to cause power outages and major travel problems from Chicago to Boston through this weekend. Ephraim Graham brings us the story.
New year and new winter weather headaches. Sand and salt trucks are already out in at least 8 states, trying to get ahead of the winter mess.
When I hit my brakes, it kind of just went sideways and I hit the rail over there.
Weather is likely to blame for a number of New Year's Day crashes that police responded to, from Texas to Nevada. And they predict icy conditions may have been what sent this pickup up onto a light pole. And where it is not icy, it is bone-chilling cold, with freeze warnings in Arizona and Nevada. Not far from Vegas, people witnessed whipping winds and snow.
The roads are pretty bad. It's getting worse, as we know. I'm pretty new to Vegas. I was definitely not expecting weather like this. I haven't seen snow in a long time, but this is pretty insane.
And it was a rare winter sight in Southern California, with people waiting overnight for the Rose Parade, lighting campfires and bundling up.
We have 3 layers on them, stockings, leggings, 2 pairs of socks.
And the wicked winter weather turned deadly for at least 5 people in California. Forecasters now warn the storm will strengthen and take a track toward the lower Great Lakes this weekend. It will also spread a swath of snow, ice, and rain, bringing travel problems from Chicago to Boston. And areas that receive a heavy amount of ice or wet snow should brace themselves for lengthy power outages. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
Well, isn't that a happy note to start the year with? I'm saying we live here in the Tidewater, Virginia. It's not going to snow here. It's just lovely and going to be warm and pleasant. And
Well, Farmer's Almanac said this was supposed to be the coldest and worst winter on record in years. And so we hadn't seen that yet. Maybe this is the start of it.
Well, we've seen something the last few weeks. They've set cold records for the last couple of months. So, I mean, it's the almanac. I'm doing all my planting on the basis of the, got to get my crops in. Yeah, baby. Okay. All right. Well, it's going to be a cold winter some places, but here again, we're on the Tidewater where we get the Gulf Stream coming in, so the weather here is fairly moderate, and so we'd invite you to move. It's lovely. Well, in other news, the United Nations could be holding a vote that could have serious implications for Israel and for the holy city of Jerusalem. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. Here's John.
Pat, the Palestinians may try again to get the UN to recognize a Palestinian state that could divide Jerusalem between the Israelis and the Palestinians. A move for such a resolution failed at the Security Council earlier this week by just 1 vote. The Palestinians are also trying to join the International Criminal Court so they can bring charges of war crimes against Israel. But that could backfire because they could also be accused of war crimes themselves due to Hamas's attacks against Israelis and other acts of violence against Jewish targets. Well, he's an internationally known political cartoonist based in Israel, and his work, called Dry Bones, appears in the Jerusalem Post and has been reprinted in newspapers from the New York Times to the Wall Street Journal. Now he's taking up a new cause, the persecution of Christians in the Middle East. Chris Mitchell brings us that story from Israel.
For more than 40 years, Jewish cartoonist York Gov has aimed his political commentary at topics like Islamic terrorism and anti-Semitism. Now he's targeting what he calls one of the worst problems in the world today, persecution of Middle East Christians.
Christian communities being totally slaughtered and murdered and driven out, and a whole ethnic cleansing of the Middle East to wipe out Christianity. And Western leaders just look the other way.
In just one recent example, this past summer, ISIS drove tens of thousands of Christians out of their ancient homes and gave them the choice to either convert or die. Another example is this burned-out church in Minya, Egypt by the Muslim Brotherhood. Christian says he can't understand the apathy in the West to what he calls a holocaust facing Middle East Christians.
I think the unusual thing is the apathy. It's totally crazy that the churches are not speaking out, that the politicians are not speaking out, that there aren't demonstrations in the street.
So Kirshen is turning up the volume. His team includes his wife Sally and their intern Michael. They've launched an internet campaign to rally support for Middle East Christians. He wants to turn dry bone fans into members, then activists.
People have to have a way to fight back against this. If our churches and our Jewish organizations and our political leaders are willing to go along with the willful rewriting of history, if they are willing to go along with just looking the other way while the Christians of the Middle East are totally slaughtered and wiped out, then somehow we, the people, have to do something.
His art form, refined over 4 decades, communicates truths in just a few lines, and pictures like this one. It says, "We Islamists are not just a bunch of Jew-hating terrorist killers." You're not? Of course not. We also murder Christians. This is clearly a mom-and-pop operation.
I'm the fulfillment department and the shipping department.
Despite their small size, they hope to make a big splash for Middle East Christians, especially at this time of year. Kirshen summed up their plight in these 2 cartoons, especially for the Christmas season. In this cartoon it says, "Santa Claus will have it easy this year. Just about the only place left in the Middle East with Christians left to visit is the Jewish state." He also penned this cartoon's plea, a Christmas wish for Christian communities across the Middle East. May the world hear your cries for help. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Herzliya, Israel.
And Pat, for quite some time, you've been highlighting the persecution of Christians in the Middle East for quite some time.
You know, the amazing thing is, here you've got a Jewish cartoonist who is saying, "I'm appalled, I'm shocked, I'm amazed that the Christians around the world don't come to the defense of their fellow religionists." Well, that's the legacy of political correctness, because Christians are scared to death to say anything about Islam. You can't criticize Islam. You can't point out Islam. And of course, in certain jurisdictions, you get sued and put in jail if you say anything about Islam. But Islam has been out killing Christians. There is no question about it. And yet, in order to take a defense of Christians, you've also got to say, well, they're being killed by somebody. And the somebody are the Islamic extremists. But we can't say that. 1,000 pages out of the United States guidelines for the FBI in having to do with terrorism were redacted or withdrawn because they mentioned the fact that these guys are terrorists and we have to be alert to them. That's what political correctness is doing. So we're disarming unilaterally. John?
Pat, speaking of terrorism, the U.S. coalition is ramping up its offensive against ISIS terrorists in Syria. An activist group says the coalition carried out more than a dozen airstrikes in and around northeastern Syria in recent days. That's where the Islamic State's de facto capital is located. The air raids hit areas on the outskirts of the city of Raqqa along the Euphrates River. This marks the heaviest round of coalition strikes on the city since ISIS captured a Jordanian pilot after his F-16 jet went down near Raqqa on Christmas Eve. No word on casualties. The attacks come as Kurdish fighters have regained ground in the key Syrian city of Kobani. They now reportedly control 70% of the town. Former New York Governor Mario Cuomo has died at the age of 82. He passed just hours after his son Andrew was sworn in Thursday for a second term as governor of New York, and he honored his father in his inauguration speech.
He couldn't be here physically today, my father, but my father is in this room. He's in the heart and mind of every person who is here.
The elder Cuomo had been hospitalized since November with congestive heart disease. He served 3 terms as governor from 1983 to 1994. He was a staunch liberal and is remembered for his scathing criticism of then-President Ronald Reagan. Cuomo was considered a leading contender for the Democratic nomination for president, but he never ran. And he was also considered for the Supreme Court during the Clinton presidency. Pat, back to you.
Well, you know, I mourn his passing. He was an extraordinarily eloquent person, a very decent human being. I don't necessarily agree with some of his politics, but that doesn't mean that I cannot mourn the fact that he is no longer with us, because he was a very, very eloquent voice, and I think we were all inspired by his words. John?
France has given up on its super tax on the wealthy, dropping it as 2014 came to an end. Socialist President Francois Hollande proposed a tax of up to 75% on people earning above 1 million euros a year. That's about 1.2 million American dollars. One critic called it Cuba without the sun. Many wealthy French fled the country to avoid paying the tax, like actor Gerard Depardieu, who became a Russian citizen. The super tax was rejected by a court, rewritten, and ultimately netted only a fraction of its projected income for the government. The super tax also created huge problems for France with international businesses, along with the sports and arts industries. And when it was proposed, British Prime Minister David Cameron promised to roll out the red carpet to French companies who wanted to avoid the tax. Well, a new study has shown why there could be a link between red meat and various types of cancer. The study found red meat includes a sugar molecule that doesn't occur naturally in the human body, so the immune system attacks it. That leads to inflammation, which can in turn lead to tumors. The lead doctor in the study from the University of California, San Diego, says the foreign chemical acts like pouring gasoline on a fire and increases the risk of cancer, but doesn't necessarily cause it. The London Daily Mail reports he doesn't advise cutting out red meat completely, just cutting back on it. The World Cancer Research Fund advises a maximum of about a pound a week, about the size of a steak or a few cheeseburgers. And Pat, I guess given that it's a new year, a lot of people will be paying close attention to their diets.
I doubt it. We're going to give up steak. You know, it's just terrible. You can't do anything anymore without violating some dietary guideline. But, you know, this shoots the Atkins diet in the head. Atkins said, you know, eat steaks, eat meat, eat pork, protein, eat bacon, eat all this kind of stuff. Whew. But I kind of agree with that thing. The red meat is something that I don't eat a whole lot of.
Well, they've said for a long time it's very hard for our bodies to break it down.
Yeah, well, I don't know what it does, but I like hamburgers.
Me too.
The confession. All right.
Mea culpa, mea culpa.
Mea culpa. All right.
Welcome back to Washington for the CBN News Break. Illegal immigrants living in California can now apply for a driver's license. The state's DMV is taking applications for the new license program aimed at boosting road safety and making illegal immigrants' lives easier. Officials expect around 1.4 million applications. California is only one of 10 states that license illegal immigrants in the country to drive. Operation Blessing is helping a farming community in Guatemala recover from a volcano eruption. In 2012, Guatemala's Volcán de Fuego erupted, forcing the evacuation of 33,000 residents from villages around the volcano. Hot ash settled on the land, ruining the soil. Operation Blessing teams have been teaching local farmers special techniques for using raised beds and drop irrigation to grow all kinds of produce. Farmers are now growing nutritious vegetables to be sold at local markets with plenty left over to feed their own families. The gift that keeps on giving. Well, you can find out more about Operation by going to ob.org.